Well, good day, everybody. And as you know, my name is Jason Stella, and I'm the host of the Lifetime Trading Podcast. And you are not going to want to miss this episode of the Lifetime Trading Podcast. Today, I'm excited to bring you Nick Tumminello. Nick is a trainer, author, educator, and founder of Performance U. And you can go to his bio and the link that I'll attach to kind of see everything that he's done. But welcome, Nick, and thanks for joining us.
I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate everybody who's taking the time to listen to this.
Awesome.
Make it worth your while.
Well, what I love, I've been following you for years and seeing you just kind of evolve and grow and, write and T Nation and all that kind of thing. And there's so much we could talk about, but I want to kind of narrow it into two things that I thought were just fantastic after going through them and reading them. And one is your book that you released, I don't know, it was maybe a couple years ago now, called Strength Training for Fat Loss. And the other is your program, Practical Program Design Mastery. So starting off with the strength training for fat loss, tell me, how did you come to write that and tell the audience what that's all about?
Sure. Well, it's actually crazy now. I mean, we're halfway through 2020 now at the time we're doing this interview, and that book actually came out in 2014 now. So time has really gone by fast, and it's still my best-selling book out of my three. And it's, still remains in the top, usually in the top 100 bestsellers in weight training category in Amazon. So that's something I'm exceptionally proud of.
Awesome. And congratulations.
I would say that what really brought it on was the fact that there's more to strength training than just the typical bodybuilding or powerlifting that we see. And most people, and when I say most people, I'm talking about the everyday individual, mom, dad, Joe, Jane, and everybody in between, who is not, making their life in athletics, and we're exercising for general fitness, right? Well, what do we really mean by that? Well, I like to say that the average person, we train and we want four things. They all start with F, right? In no particular order: fitness, function, fat loss, fun, right? And when I say fun, we all know it's not like fun like going to a water park fun. I just mean it just doesn't suck. It's not boring. It's something that we want to, keep doing on a regular basis in our lives. That's important. So when we look at what many people are doing and the requests that I was getting as a trainer, a full-time trainer, where, people want faster paced workouts, something that's a little bit more higher metabolically demanding. We'll get into those details in a bit.
Sure.
But also something that's not very cardio based, because that's an endurance training program. So that you put those together and you have strength training for fat loss. What brought the book was a systemized approach to it, because as we know, if you get on YouTube or Instagram and you type in, hardcore workout or metabolic circuit or yada, 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 you'll literally see, a Baskin-Robbins variety of it's fitness, basically fitness versions of Jerry Springer and Jackass. So, it's the question of how do we clean up this social media mess and provide a system that provides people with the intense workout and varied workout that they crave, right? Because we all want that butt-kicking workout. But how do we also do it in a systematic and safe and smart way that a trainer, a very advanced and seasoned trainers such as yourself, will look at and appreciate the scientific rationale behind it and go, okay, this is how this should be done.
Yeah. Well, and, obviously randomness has blown up in the industry, whether it's through CrossFit or through P90X back in the day. And right. There's a bit to the randomness of keeping people engaged, but at the same time, having structured randomness, I guess, is what really needs to be there. And that's what I love about, you mentioned the 3 C's. So, talk a little bit about, what is the difference between metabolic strength training and traditional strength training?
Sure. So we all talk about goals, right? And most strength training information that we get normally comes from 2 areas. Normally comes from powerlifting or bodybuilding. Now, right there's more similarities than differences, right? Bicep curls are bicep curls, push-ups are push-ups, squats are squats, and so forth. However, it's how you put those together, all those tools together, the exercises, and the pace of the workout, sets and reps, etc. For the goal. Powerlifting the goal is to maximize your maximum strength in certain lifts. Bodybuilding is to maximize muscular development, physique development, how big your biceps are, how big your pecs are, and so forth. Metabolic strength training is just as the name implies. The goal of strength training in that context is to maximize the metabolic demand of each workout. Now, what does that mean? It basically just means, trainers might call it a metabolic disturbance. It just means how many calories you burn during the workout and post the workout based on what we call EPOC, EPOC, excessive post-oxygen consumption, Now, as a trainer and as the author of Strength Training for Fat Loss, I'll be the first one to say that exercise in general is not a great way to really burn calories. It's very, we've all been on the treadmill, whether the numbers are accurate or not, and you do all this hard work, and then you look at how many calories you're burning, you're like, that's it? Man, that's like one bite of a candy bar kind of thing, right? That's 100% true. And in fact, cardio, I talk about this in the book, cardio per time, like 30 minutes of cardio, steady state versus 30 minutes of strength training, cardio tends to burn more calories per minute. However, why would you then choose strength training? Well, what cardio doesn't do is it doesn't build the shape of your body. Muscle is the shape of your body. So the idea of the book is to also focus on what you put in your mouth. That's the word diet. I don't mean go on a crash diet or some special magic diet that you hate or makes you feel like you're eating like a bunny rabbit. But it's way easier. Nothing is, it's simpler, I would say, to just not eat the extra 300 calorie bagel than it is to get on the elliptical trainer and burn that 300 calories off.
I just had that conversation with my 8-year-old daughter and what it would take. I'm like, you ran around the block? Yeah, that's good, but you're eating bagels every morning. So I don't know if that's upsetting.
Sure. So, you can't talk about fat loss without understanding that you have to be in a caloric deficit. By the way, I understand, I've had these conversations my whole career. When we talk about calories, we're not just talking about the pure unit. Nutrient density is important, right? Because we all say, well, what if I just ate 1,500 calories and nothing but candy bars and ice cream and junk food and 1,500 calories versus, fruits and vegetables and lean meats or meat substitutes if you're a vegan or vegetarian. 100% correct. However, you can still gain extra fat if you're eating more calories, nutrient-dense calories, than you consume. It's a heck of a lot harder when you're eating a lot of celery and broccoli and tomatoes and chicken breast, but it can still happen. So just because you're eating really well, normally and you're gaining fat, it means you are still eating in excess calories. So that's why calories are still important. So the takeaway here is to watch what you eat, try to, minimize your caloric intake, maximize your protein, get a lot of nutrients, but use metabolic strength training to improve the shape of your body. And as you get leaner, it will reveal that shape. Whereas if you just did the cardio, it'll work on your heart and lungs, but it's not really going to do much for changing the shape of your body and all the benefits that resistance training has. Plus, it's a heck of a lot more interesting and fun and dynamic of all the available strength training exercises and ways to put them together. We'll get into the 3 C's. Than just the old boring, 30 minutes on the elliptical. Now, if you like that, if you like jogging, nobody is saying don't do that, right? Because I've had these conversations so many times. I'm used to the common concern, then very reasonable concerns and questions people have. Oh, are you telling me not to do cardio? I love cardio. Don't tell, 100% right, reasonable. If that's the case, don't stop doing anything that you like that you're going to keep doing. I would recommend then integrating in some resistance training, strength training, a few times a week to give you the benefits that the cardio that you're doing is not getting you.
Got it. So, while I think it's getting better, throughout not in our industry, but in the world, is that, there's the concept of strength training is going to make you bigger and the fear of that. And, I always say that it's not strength training. It's how you're doing the strength training. It's what you're putting in your mouth, obviously. And
Sure.
The acute exercise variables, sets, reps, rest intervals, all of those things are really what dictate the outcome. So with regards to, again, metabolic strength training and how are the designing of the sets and reps and rest different from traditional, maybe strength training that might get people bigger?
Sure. So this is really the question that separates what we talk about in the book from random workouts, right? Seeing things on YouTube and doing it. Oh, it made me sweat.
Yep.
Is we understand that there's principles behind that we have to stick with and utilize. So the 3 C's, which we talk about in the book, here's what they mean, is they mean in no particular order. We call it the 3 C's of metabolic strength training: circuits, complexes, and combinations. Let me give you a quick, overall to understand what they are. Everybody knows what a circuit is: multiple different exercises done back to back together. Could be on machines, free weights, a combination, you name it.
Yep.
Then we have combinations. Combination, the most familiar people might be with, whether you do them or not, are Olympic lifts, right? And I'm not saying that's the only combination,
Yep.
but it's a good example where you're basically combining like a deadlift with a clean. That's where you bring it from your hips to your shoulders,
Yep.
to a shoulder press, right? They might
Yep.
call it push jerk or whatever.
Yep.
That's technically 3 different movements that are done in combination, one after the other in sequence. That would be a combination. Now I can do that with a pair of dumbbells, right? So I can bend over in a deadlift position. I can do 1 Romanian deadlift. Then I can stay bent over and do 1 dumbbell bent over row. Then I can stand up, and then I can do like a dumbbell biceps curl or kind of a cheat curl where I use my legs a little bit. Then I can do a overhead dumbbell press and bring it down and bring the dumbbells back down where I started. That would be 1 rep. That would be a combination.
So you're taking
Cool.
4 different exercises and looping them together into a combination.
In single rep sequence, or like 2 reps, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, and then repeating those.
Yep. So
The third is what we call a complex. A complex is very similar to a combination, except you finish all the reps in 1 movement before you move into the next movement. For example, you have your set of dumbbells. You bend over. You do 10 bent over rows. I'm just going to use, I jokingly say every personal trainer's favorite number is 10. So for ease of examples, let's use that.
Yeah.
Right. So we do bent over rows for 10. And then we do bicep curls as we stand up. We do bicep curls for 10. Then the dumbbells are at our shoulders. Then we do shoulder presses for 10. Then we lower, check this out. We lower the dumbbells down to our shoulders. We hold them there. And then we do reverse lunges, 5 on each leg, 10 total. Then you bend over into the Romanian deadlift position. And then you hinge your hips up and down, and you do 10 Romanian deadlifts. Right now, I said that in a slightly different order than I might do them in. I'll explain that in a moment. Yeah. But that would be a complex. 4 different exercises. We did upper body pushing, pulling, hip, knee, all of those done. Basically, it's a circuit using the same piece of equipment. Side note, logistically, meaning if you're in a big box gym, I know that's a little tougher now. We're all living in Coronaville, right? Mm-hmm. But when we get back to the gyms and the gyms are in full steam ahead, and you're kind of working with real estate is valuable in the gym. You grab that 25-pound pair of dumbbells. You don't want to put them down because someone else is waiting to steal them from you, right? So if you were doing a circuit in a big box gym, that's not going to work logistically very well, because you're now being that guy, right? Or that person in the gym. It's like, I'm using that. It's like, hey, the other members are going to be like, man, come on, you got to give us some real estate here. But if I grab 1 dumbbell, I can do a whole circuit with 1 set of dumbbells. That would be a complex.
Got it.
Right? So logistically, it makes sense. Now, what do all 3 of these C's, complexes, combinations, and circuits, have in common? Yep. They all have certain principles in common. All of these principles are moving in the same direction, which is to maximize the metabolic demand. Right?
Yep.
And that is as follows. They're all total body. In simple terms, the more muscles you work, the more energy that takes. Calories or energy. Do the math. Right? So it's more metabolically demanding that way. They all require a longer sustained work effort, right? So if I'm doing a set of bicep curls, 10 reps, whatever, and then I do my 2-minute rest, where I'm now on my phone, right? So it's, 1 set of bicep curls, 3 minutes of Instagram, 1 set of bicep curls, 3 minutes of Instagram. That's how a lot of people's workouts go. However, so the bicep curls may take 40 seconds.
Yeah. If
I'm doing a good tempo and I'm not cheating. But if I do bicep curls with a row, with dumbbell deadlifts, with dumbbell shoulder presses and so forth, I might be working consistently for about 2 minutes, always under that tension. So that is going to increase metabolic demand. And by the way, if anybody cares about research references, I have plenty of research references in the book to validate these statements. Because that's one way to help decipher fiction from nonfiction. I always joke. People say, "Well, how would you classify your training style?" And I like to joke and I say nonfiction.
That's good.
So one of the ways to look at whether things are fiction or nonfiction is to look, do they have some decent references to them?
Yeah.
And I mean actual studies, not just some other expert who says this person agrees with me.
And this works. Yeah.
So these are provided in the book as well. So when you have a total body effort, or maximize how many muscles are utilized in a sustained effort, and they're also high intensity, because you're working against loads that you can't just do for 50 repetitions, right?
Yep.
So all three of those things have been demonstrated in research studies to increase the metabolic demand. Now, here's why this is important to understand your goals. You achieve what you emphasize. That they say that in American football. For our European listeners, I'm talking about the NFL.
Yeah.
However, when you do that, are you going to maximize your strength as if you're trying to do the best you can to maximize your bench press numbers? No, because in those cases, you'd want to do less reps, really, really heavy, close to your 1 rep max, and you'd want to rest about 5 minutes between sets.
Yeah.
So are we going to use a bench press in these sorts of workouts as a circuit or something? Sure. But how would we use the bench press versus sets, reps, rest?
Yep.
That's where the differences become between what makes a great trainer and someone who's just throwing exercises together random.
Yep.
To the outsider, everything looks like a bench press, right? I know bench press form. I was coached with that. I played sports in high school, yada, yada, yada. Okay, yes, but can you use that with precision?
Yep.
To understand one goal, to maximize one goal versus the other?
Yep.
One thing I left out is that if you're trying to maximize the metabolic demand, more research on this, shorter rest periods do that, but that gives you incomplete recovery.
Yep.
So because of that, you get incomplete recovery. You can't go as heavy the next set, which would not be the best approach if you're trying to maximize muscular development or maximum strength. But we're not trying to do that.
Yep.
You see? So
but people will still, especially, people with a younger training age, they're still, they'll still get stronger.
You're still going to get stronger. So the key word, very good point, you brought that up. The key word is maximize.
Yep.
What are you trying to maximize?
Mm-hmm.
You see? So, for example, let's look at it like a salad. I know this is going to sound like a silly analogy, but hear me out here. All the vegetables in that salad offer nutrients that other vegetables in the salad don't, right? The tomatoes are higher in certain nutrients, but if I only ate tomatoes, I would still be nutrient deficient in all of the nutrients that tomatoes don't provide. Yep. Which is why I want to have a colorful salad bowl with some onions in there, whatever, right? Lettuce, whatever. Now, this is the same thing. Let's say I only have so much room in there, though. So the more I emphasize one vegetable, the less room I have for the other. So I'm still going to have some of the nutrients from what I have less of, but I'm not going to maximize that nutrient. I'm not going to have plenty of that.
Yep.
That training is exactly the same way. It's all healthy for you, as long as you don't overdo it, right? If I drank 5 gallons of water in front of you, I might die. So I can overdo this too.
Yeah.
However, it's how you tweak the dials based on what you want. Now, circling things back around to what I say the goals were and why I wrote the book. The majority of people that I was working with and seeing in the gyms, working with trainers and working out on their own, are not training to be bodybuilders and are not training to be powerlifters and are not making a career in athletics. Sure, we're recreational tennis players and golfers and yada, 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 but we're that's our secondary sport, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But our main goals were to stay fit, keep it interesting, right? And have a wider platform of fitness. That way I could go out and play Frisbee one day. I could go take surfing lessons one day. I could go hike one day and not feel like when I came home, I'd be sitting there like I feel like I have full body tendonitis, right? For a week. Yeah. So when you look at what people were actually looking to do, and then we look at what most of the books were, which were geared towards athletes, powerlifting, or bodybuilding, man, what most people really want is this strength training for fat loss. And because of the metabolic demand, it makes you really fit,
Yep.
right? It builds your endurance up as a secondary benefit. So I would say that's a likely reason why the book has continued to sell so well, because not only does it have a scientific basis, but it also fills a need based on what many people are training for anyway. And it gives a very smart, scientifically founded, gym floor proven direction that's not just stuck with randomness where we start to increase our risk of being one of those YouTube fail videos.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And, kind of what I'm hearing is it provides structure to these metabolic workouts and provide structure to what has been in the past very random and just selection of a bunch of stuff and throw it together. The other thing too is you mentioned, I heard the term early on, strategic variation. That's, where there's a specific reason why I'm choosing a specific rep scheme and a specific rest interval and those particular things. And so within the 3 C's and the programming, what is the typical rep ranges and why?
I love that. I love that question. So we have a variety in the workout. So for example, if you're going to do a circuit, our rep ranges tend to be around 8 reps to 15 reps per exercise. Mm-hmm. If you're going to do a complex, remember that's one piece of equipment now doing many different movements, you're limited by the weakest movement in the complex. So let's say the complex is 4 exercises. And this would be a typical complex, by the way, that we may do, right? Let's say we have a single dumbbell in hand. Well, these are really cool because anytime you hold one dumbbell, let's say in your right hand, the whole time gravity is trying to pull you down to the right? It's trying to side bend you to the right. So guess what has to happen to keep you upright and centered? Your whole entire left side of your core muscles automatically get work the entire time. So here's what a typical circuit complex might look like. We call it a unilateral dumbbell complex. So the dumbbell, once it's in your right hand, it doesn't leave your right hand. You'll do bent over rows. Again, let's just keep it easy. We'll say around 8 reps, right? Then we would bring the dumbbell up to our right shoulder, and then we would do reverse lunges. Let's say we would do 10 reps of that. Now my dumbbell's already at my shoulder. I'm going to do shoulder presses, or again, with the right hand. Now with that, I may do 5 or 6 reps. I'll explain why. Then I'll bring it down, and then I'll do single leg Romanian deadlifts. I'll be balancing on my left leg in this case. Now, here's why I mixed up those sets and reps. This speaks to answering your question. If a weight is heavy enough or so heavy that I can only do 6 reps with shoulder presses, I'm gonna do a heck of a lot more when it comes to Romanian deadlifts or lunges because my legs are much stronger than my upper body. Secondly, when I compare upper body pushing to pulling movements, I'm going to be stronger doing the rows than I am with the same weight doing presses. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to pick the same reps. This is a very common mistake I see made by trainers and clients alike, or exercise enthusiasts alike, is they do the same amount of reps for everything. However, it may be too heavy for one movement, in this case, the shoulder press, and it may be way too easy for another movement in the other cases of the rows or the deadlifts. So how I would choose reps is I would say, okay, what's my minimum amount of reps that I want to do for my weakest exercise? Weakest exercise would be the overhead press. Okay, I want to get at least 6. All right, so that's how I choose my weight. Now, the other reps I do are relative to that. Well, if I can do 6 for the shoulder press, I can bang out 15 for the Romanian deadlifts. Yep. Right before I get fatigued. Okay, 15 it is. You see?
Yeah.
Right, 12 for the bent over rows. Again, these are general ranges, but you see, it doesn't have to be the same number.
And you do that as opposed to, and you mentioned it, obviously in clubs, it's a little bit harder to hoard a bunch of weights, although people do it all the time. But for the most part, the reason why you're not switching weights in between and having different loads for different movements is why.
Very good question. So I want to wrap up this thing about sets and reps for a second, though. Yeah. Then I'll get to the rest and why we don't switch up for certain protocols. For the combinations, however, because you're only doing 1 rep of each, we like to go as heavy as you can So it's each time a fairly, it's basically almost like a 5 RM type movement.
Yep.
You bang out 1 rep of each, you put the weight down, take a little breath for a second and do it again. We like to do those for time. So I might say, okay, you got 8 minutes. See how many times you can do this combination of 4 movements. And it could just be a clean and press, right? If you can do those types of movements. So the beauty of each of those 3 C's is although they utilize the same principles, they utilize them in slightly different ways. So if you're doing a circuit here, look, this is pro and con. This starts to answer your question now. The beauty of a circuit is I can go a little harder. Remember I said intensity is one of the major points of metabolic demanding or increasing metabolic demand. Because I have to have transition time between circuit stations, exercises within a circuit, that gives me a little breathing time. Yep. That little breathing time helps me to go a little bit harder, save a little bit of energy or build a little bit of energy back up to go to the next exercise. So I'm able to go a little heavier, a little harder. Mm-hmm. If I'm doing a complex is same piece of equipment, one exercise after the other, 10 reps here, 8 reps here, 12 reps here. There is no break between exercises because there is no transition. I'm holding the dumbbell or the barbell or whatever the entire time. So the beauty of that is it actually minimizes my rest. That's the pro. But the con is that because it's minimizing my rest, I probably can't go as heavy, so I go a little higher reps. The reason why I say the 3 C's of metabolic strength training is because all of them are equally effective in that you have now variety to mix up all 3. And if an environment calls for you to not be able to do one versus the other, you can just use one as a default. You can use all 3 in a single workout to mix things up. So the why you would do it is really going to be dependent on A, what you like, what would you get most excited about, B, what your environment calls for. Okay, it's a big box gym and it's 6:30 a.m. or 6:30 p.m. when everybody and their dog is there working out. And well, in that case, a circuit is out. So now you're stuck with combinations and complexes. So now you say, well, I don't really like combinations. I don't really like the single rep thing. I'd rather do 10 here and 8 here. Good. There you go. Yep. Right? But you know that what you're choosing from is still going to be beneficial towards your
and there's backing behind it. There's a thought behind it.
Yeah, correct. So there are basically 3 options that all are. So you talked about changing variety. This is varying without changing. We are staying consistent to the exact same principles, total body, high effort over a longer period of time, right? However, they allow you to express those principles in slightly different ways, depending on whether you're doing a circuit, a combination, or both in a given workout. And that way it does allow you to change your reps and sets to fit whichever context that you like. And hopefully, if you're in different environments, you do a little bit of each, so you even have a higher fitness capacity. So it gives you the variety that we crave from the neck up, as I say, the psychology of it keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
And it gives us nerd trainers like you and I the principles that we know are important from the neck down. That's the physiology.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked about this in a previous podcast. It's just the art and science of programming and truly the complexity of it. And, you've been at the game for 25 plus years. I've been a little bit less than that, but around pretty close. And I always go back to, the people from a program design that had influenced me, the Charles Poliquins of the world, the Paul Checks of the world, and their program designs that they had. And I always said, when you think you've got it all and there's 26 principles on just manipulating repetitions and then another 22 on just sets, and let alone now the art of putting all of those together, that's what I love. And what hopefully people are taking away, especially the coaches out there, is the complete thought that was put into this to bring structure and science and if you want to call it randomness, but something that makes sense, and that it's not just throw it out there.
Sure. And I'm glad you brought that up about some really intensive, programming structure and whatnot. I wrote an article for T Nation, I think it was in this year, called something about training consistency versus variety, which one is best or something like that, And what I went through is I went for each goal. We have fat loss as a goal, general fitness as a goal, sports performance as a goal, and I think bodybuilding or strength training, getting stronger as a goal. And if your goal is obviously mastering certain lifts, which would be closer to like a power lifter or Olympic lifter type, you clearly need consistency because part of it is practice, right? There's skills involved. Now, if it's sports performance, you have a little bit more chance for variety, but you have to hit certain movements that are crucial that are going to help transfer to your sport, right? Because you're not training to be great in the gym, right? It's the old Kenny Powers, right? I'm not trying to be the best at exercising, right? I'm trying to be the best on the field. However, if general fitness and fat loss is your goal, then you really can be a lot more varied in your exercise selection. What remains consistent is your effort and that you're consistently going to exercise.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say go to the gym because there's a lot other ways to exercise than, going to the gym. So with that being said, the programs that I provide in the Strength Training for Fat Loss book basically keeps it pretty simple. We have 2 different programs, A and B, and you just flip-flop back and forth. And then I gave progressive sets and reps for those. However, I would have no problem if somebody said, you know what, I'm not even going to follow that week 1, do this many reps, week 2, do this many reps. If I just wanted to take I can't remember how many workouts we have in the book. It's easily 20. It's a lot. If you just said every day I'm just going to do a different one of those workouts and just stay with the week 1 sets and reps and then just keep repeating so I never – till it's 6 weeks until I've seen the same workout again. It would probably be more.
Yep.
And that would be fine. As long as I would say you're choosing a weight that keeps the intensity level up relative to the reps that I'm giving you. So this kind of answers a question that you and I get from many clients. They go, how much weight should I use?
Yeah,
right?
That was
And our answer, I'm obviously not going to put words in your mouth, but I know you're an knowledgeable trainer, so I can predict what your answer would be. I'll tell you what my answer is. I would say, well, it depends on the reps that I'm asking you to do.
Yep.
If I say 8 to 12 reps, it means I want you to find a weight that is not so light that you could do 20 reps of it, which means you're pretty much getting close to what we would call technical failure at 12 reps, which means you're not cheating the crap out of it to get beyond 12. But that's not so heavy that you can't get at least 8.
Yep.
So that's how you choose how much weight you should do. You have to experiment a little bit with some warm-up sets to find what weight is not too light that you can do beyond 12 and not too heavy that you can't do at least 8. So you don't know what weight you should use until we know what reps are you being asked to do.
It brings up a question too, in that in the complexes and the combinations, choosing the weight obviously is I would say a little bit more difficult because of what you just said. But at the same time, there's people that will choose a weight and then they'll rest in between the complex or in between the combination. Any insight there as opposed to picking, is it more important to pick the right weight so that you complete the full complex or the full compound or combination, I'm sorry. Or is it okay to just rest in between or rather not?
Yeah, I mean, you have to rest when you feel like you need to, right? I mean, that's the thing too. There is that sweet spot between having an intense butt-kicking workout and overdoing it, right? Where there's no excuse for you hear about these people, and even in college sports, getting rhabdo, and there is no excuse for that. That is 100% the fault of the coach. Right now, if you're training on your own and you do that, then that is your fault, right? You have, as I say, you have more energy than brains at that point, right? So if you feel like, man, I just need to stop for a second, great. But if you're just kind of doing it to do it, well, then maybe, hey, you gotta give yourself a little kick in the gym shorts. But it also could mean that you needed to rest a little bit longer in between sets from set 1 to 2. Could mean that you might have to reduce the weight a little bit. But that being said, I talked about this a little earlier. Some things you might prefer to do for time versus an amount of reps. Now, here's what's important. It is important to have some reference point to what you did prior, even if it's just one exercise. Because as you're training and doing certain things, you should get a little fitter. You should have a little bit more potential to be able to do something more. So even just one exercise. So let's say you gave yourself 30 seconds. I'm just going to keep it really easy. Let's say push-ups. Could be incline push-ups, kneeling push-ups, whatever push-up works for you. Yeah. And you just said, I'm going to give myself 30 seconds to do as many good push-ups as I can do. Now, it's important that you have some sort of baseline to make sure that you're consistent in your push-ups. So I would say put like a pad or something underneath and make sure you touch your chest every time.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to compare workout 1 or week 1 to week 2, you don't want to make sure that if you say, well, I kicked butt, I did 10 more reps. It's like, yeah, but those were all half-ass reps. It's an unfair test to yourself at that point, right? So you need to have something that gives you consistency and range of motion and so forth. But if you're going to give yourself time and then you say, okay, I did 15 push-ups. Well, now you have an idea. Now I'm going to try to do at least 16. Your body is the same weight, hopefully, right? So you can do the same thing with grabbing a certain load in your hands. Everybody's going to have an upper limit to that, right? I mean, you can probably say the same thing here. I've been lifting weights since I've been a teenager. I'm 41 now. I'm still doing the same bicep curl weight. It's like, you can't always add weight to the bar. Otherwise, I'd be squatting 2,000 pounds by this point, right? So there always is going to be an upper limit to things. But in that case, you can expand the time a little longer. You can cut your rest back a little bit. So little subtle tweaks will show you, hey, I am getting a little fitter, right? Could you do the same amount of work in a little less time? However, don't treat it, this is where people go wrong. This is into that gym fail video thing again. It's not a race. I always tell people, do the time better.
Yep.
It's not about just doing more. Can you do it better? Can you have one rep with a little bit better control in the range of motion versus just cheating it to say, oh, I got one more rep?
Well, and what's important there too, I think, for a lot of the coaches is the awareness of those particular things and bringing awareness to the client and, going back to making the client feel like they're accomplishing something, because in some cases it might take them a while to actually lose weight or lose fat. But most likely, depending upon what their previous workout history is, if it's very little, they're going to see strength. They're going to see increased repetitions. They're going to see those adaptations, which if you bring attention to it, sometimes they're not caring about that, but if you bring attention to it, it will still make them feel like they've accomplished something, which keeps them moving, keeps them coming back, and hopefully you get them to their goal in the long term.
Sure. Actually, I want to piggyback off what you just said. That's very crucial. Do you know the stats? And I'm not asking you this as kind of like one of those flashlight in your eyes, where were you in the night? I actually don't remember it offhand. What's the average after you become like an adult professional in the working world? What's like the average amount of weight that adults tend to gain each year? Isn't it like a couple pounds?
Yeah. I don't have that off the top of my head too, but yeah,
It's a few pounds, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
minus COVID.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, keeping that in mind. So when we think fat loss, we always kind of think, getting leaner and leaner. But what about weight management? It's actually a lot more realistic to think about it from a weight management perspective. And I'll raise my hand high and proud when I say the majority of clients that I've worked with, from NFL level caliber players to everyday Joes and Janes and everybody in between, not many, it was a very small portion of them. And I'm talking about I've worked with, I don't know how many hundreds of people throughout my career. So I've had clients that work with me for 10 years, don't look that much different from the day that they stepped into my gym to work with me, right?
Yep.
Why? That's not a fault of my own or some lack of competency on my part.
Yep.
It's the fact that they're a working person who working out is secondary to them, right? They want to be, I always joke when trainers say like, oh, people are satisfied with being mediocre when they don't go into the gym and train. They're just working out just to work out. It's like, all right, there's a lot of ways to be an elite human being. I didn't realize it was only just being a gym rat, right?
Yeah.
So, they're trying to be elite doctors and lawyers and teachers and janitors and moms and dads and PE teachers and everything in between. So they're working out as lifestyle to allow them to continue to be elite at what their profession, which means they're not there to organize their whole life around gyms and kitchens or working out and food preparation, right? Now, when you look at it that way, you realize, if any trainers are listening, there's nothing wrong with your clients, and there's certainly nothing wrong with what you're doing. If a lot of your clients don't look that much different from the time they stepped foot into training with you, and it doesn't mean that they don't care. Because if they've been with you for 4 years training twice a week, they've pretty much bought you about 3 new cars with how much money they've paid you at that point.
Yeah.
And they've spent a heck of a lot of time with you, probably some more time than they spent with a lot of their family members. So they care. They just don't care about the exact thing that you may, if you're a gym rat, you care about, which is chasing a bigger back or a bigger deadlift.
Yeah.
Right. Their goal is consistency and in building a love and appreciation for movement, and we would call it fitness, and staying up with it.
Yep.
Because previously they've hated everything they've done, or maybe it was always banging them up and they were hurting their knees and doing this, that, and the other. It wasn't interesting to them.
Yep.
So let's keep in mind, goals are not just the aesthetic things that we think about. We tend to always associate that. We'll never get away with that. All of us want to look better naked. Nothing, can't get away from that. However, it's what we'll really do in actual, best prediction of future behavior is past behavior.
Yep.
Right. So the whole idea of weight management is really important. Hey, you might not have gained any weight here, but who knows how much stuff you've eaten since then. What you've done here is defense.
Yep.
We've allowed you to keep eating all the Doritos and cookies and, 2 candy bars and a Starbucks cup drinks that you love because you come here. Something to be said for that.
Yeah. It brings up a point. I loved your perspective on this. I've talked to trainers before, and my client's just not doing what I'm telling them to do, and I'm just going to fire them, and I've heard that, and sometimes I go, why would you do that? Like what's going on there? What's your thoughts on that? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I think I covered it. I think it's a lack of losing our way and forgetting that there's more to exercise than bigger biceps and bigger glutes and bigger bench press.
Yep, exactly.
Right? I always say it's well known that regular exercise, aside from some of the basics, better sleep, better sex, happier, right? It's good for, reductions in depression, things like that. Also weight management, yada, yada. How about this one? A reduction in all-cause mortality. That's doctor speak for less risk of developing disease and living longer. Man, who cares about that? Well, that's not a sexy goal, right? So those are all 100% legitimate, well-researched goals that us trainers sometimes, when we start getting caught up in that, my client's not doing what I tell him to do. Yeah. It's like, yeah, but there's more to life than that people are coming to us. We're gym rats, so that's what we care about.
Well, right? And also, can you adjust your programming and your exercise selection and how you put things together to get them to actually potentially like it too? Maybe that's it as well.
Yeah, it all starts at the neck up, man. Yeah. We all run. This is a fundamental human reality. We all run towards what makes us happy, and we run away from what doesn't.
Yeah.
So, we can talk
until what doesn't gets so bad that now it will force to go and do it.
Right. And this is why we all know trainers, right, who we think are probably the worst trainer in the world, and that trainer is book solid and all their clients sing their praises. And we also, maybe this ourselves, or we know somebody who is a walking, talking physiology and biomechanics textbook, and they can't seem to keep or find clients to save their neck. Mm-hmm. Right. So again, it starts with the personality, and that is the driver. And this is talking from a technical nerd when it comes to training.
Yeah.
Right. So, you can take with that what you will, but you have to consider it. We are in the personal training field. Even if it's semi-private, it's still personal. People want to feel they're comfortable. They want to feel happy when they go there. They want to feel proud to sing your praises. That's where it starts.
Yep. It's difficult too, because if I talked about this on a previous podcast too, in that if you really look at all the attributes and the needs to be a successful trainer, it's kind of like not in many human beings. It really isn't when you look at it, to be able to be personable and connect with people and have empathy for people, be able to drive them, be able to program design and have the science background. I always say the science building and the business building, if you went to college, you usually don't go to both of those buildings. It's one or the other. That's awesome. One thing we didn't talk, we talked about it briefly, but you mentioned it, and I think it's important to kind of round this up before we get into the program design course, is you mentioned intensity being more important than duration. So 2 questions I've got on that. Explain that, but then also, with the workouts that you have in there, what is the average duration of the workout as well. So I'd love for you to hit on both of those.
Yeah, good question. I would say the average duration is anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour, depending on how fast you go through it, which is obviously going to depend on your fitness level, how much you need to rest, but between sets and things like that. So obviously there's some room for adjustment. And really good point that you brought up. We have a section in the book called, intensity is more important than duration. Yep. Well, let's look at it this way. I could just, dog it for a while and just walk. And there's nothing wrong with walking for an hour. Yeah. Or I could run all out sprints, right? And I could go 10 seconds on and 50 seconds off and do 10 rounds of that, right? You and I both know we're pretty fit guys. That would put anybody on the ground. Yeah. That's 10 minutes and when you actually add it up, of 10 seconds times 10, it's only 100 seconds of actual intense work, right? Now, your body's still working when it's recovering, which is why your heart rate's still up, and we'd be talking like this, oh, yeah, almost ready. So our body's technically working. So which one of those is probably going to be more beneficial in the long run? Now, I'm not downplaying walking as saying it's not good for you and not everybody can sprint. So please understand the context of the little example that I'm using.
Based on the goal that we're talking about.
Right. So what I'm saying is just because you did something for a long period of time doesn't mean you did much, or it doesn't speak to how much density you got out of that, right? It would be like the person who you paid to have on the clock, but then when you went there and you go, this is all you did after being here for 3 hours? Right.
Well, and you mentioned something there. Explain that, because you said the word density, and I love it. I've talked to Charles Staley quite a bit about the concept that he had created, escalating density. But explain what you mean by that, so that people understand what you mean by the density.
It's how much work you did in a given time frame.
Yep.
So it's not doing more in less time. It's doing more in the same time.
Yeah. Got it. So the other thing that could get confusing using the term intensity in this style of training is typically strength training intensity is based off of your 1 repetition max. Right. And then you've got your cardiovascular intensity that is based off of your heart rate and how high you're working towards your heart rate max. We've kind of combined-ish those things. So how would you speak to those things?
When I speak, I use everyday terminology. I don't use trainer terminology, even though I'm a trainer, because here's the thing. If I use everyday terminology, trainers will understand it. But if I use trainer terminology, clients won't understand it, and only trainers will understand it. So when I say intensity, I'm really just meaning you're doing things that are challenging you in regards to the weights that you choose. So remember I said, like, if I say 8 to 12 reps, it means you can't do more than 12. Yep. That means you're getting to a point where you're pushing yourself, where you're getting close to that, technical failure point. When I say technical failure, it just means your technique is still good, but you can't do any more in good technique. Yep. So it's the way to say to go to failure without cheating it and starting to put yourself more at risk.
Yep.
Intensity is lowering the rest, less rest. So you're still kind of tired going into the next set. So yes, you are right. When you start getting into the trainer terms, we have all these, well, what do you mean specifically kind of thing? I'm not speaking to that. I'm just talking about how us clients and exercisers, we just go, this is working me, where I'm not just kind of lollygagging through it. That's really all I mean. There's nothing more technical about it.
And so one thing that I asked, I think we may have went off on a tangent, but I think it's important, is why strength training for fat loss and this metabolic strength training, why that, got to use the term loosely, but why it won't get you bigger, and the fear that some people have with utilizing strength training and making them bigger, especially the female population.
Yeah. Well, I mean, strength training does grow muscles, so it can make you bigger. I actually may go down a rabbit hole here that you might move more than you wanted to. So
no, that's fine. That's great.
A little bit. Muscles physiologically only do 3 things. They either atrophy, which is the opposite of growth. It's basically they shrink, right? You lose muscle tissue. They stay the same, or they hypertrophy, which is the opposite of atrophy. Hypertrophy just means grow muscles. Now, what do we, in magazine terms, that means tighten, tone, perkier, bigger, bulk, any of those things, right? So interestingly, a lot of females and some guys, want perkier glutes. There's no way you can develop tighter, perkier glutes without creating hypertrophy, which means you are making your glutes bigger. No way around it, right? How would you tell if we're talking about now minus surgery, by the way.
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah. So how would you measure your progress? You would measure your circumference. If they got bigger, that's bigger muscles. So we all want bigger muscles. We just tend to gravitate towards certain terminologies, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And guys rarely will say, I want perkier biceps. Say, I want bigger biceps.
Yeah.
But the physiology is exactly the same for what some people want in the glutes.
Yeah.
So now, that being said, you're certainly going to gain muscle from doing this. However, the road you're starting to go down now is this. If you're in a caloric deficit, because there's 3 ways to create a caloric deficit, and they're not mutually exclusive. One is you just burn calories through exercise, more calories than you consume. 2 is you just consume less calories, and 3 is a combination of the 2. And I'm really promoting the 3 option, which is the combination of the 2. So this kind of speaks to another point that you constantly hear trainers. I see it. If I don't see it every week on social media, it's this. There's no such thing as fat loss workouts. There's just, fat loss diets. 100% right. I get with what you're saying. What they're saying is, everything has context. What they're saying is that just because you're doing workouts like Nick has in his book titled Strength Training for Fat Loss, if you're not combining them with a diet that puts you in a caloric deficit, you're not losing any fat. Correct. However, this is why I am justified in writing the book Strength Training for Fat Loss, and we say this in the book. If your goal is to maximize fat loss and fitness, then the way you put your workouts together should not look like a powerlifting workout or a bodybuilding workout. So there are ways to use strength training to put strength training exercises and workouts together, as we've already talked about, the 3 C's and so forth, towards that goal. But as I say in the book, all this stuff will just be for fitness. You won't get the fat loss part if you also aren't in a caloric deficit. Now, if you're in a caloric deficit, can you gain muscle in a caloric deficit? Sure, because your body is burning excessive calories from storage. But it's pretty hard to get bigger and bulkier, even when look at most guys in the gym who are trying their damnedest to get bigger.
Yeah.
They're not even that big.
Well, and something we haven't talked about is the whole hormonal aspect of what these workouts do, and obviously the difference in hormones, and specifically testosterone between males and females as well. And males, as they age, obviously we're seeing that, more and more,
Sure.
dropping pretty significantly.
Sure. Now, but before we move on, there is something that's very important here. And I never hear trainers talk about this, but we deal with it all the time. I've been lucky enough to train many female clients who are very heavy into fitness. I've trained multiple figure girls. I've trained multiple other trainers. I get a lot of trainers coming to me for workouts. And I've worked many, many times with females who know what they're doing, know their way around the gym, and say, look, my arms are just too big. I don't like my arms. They're just too, and they got that genetic, right? Or a lot of females, it's their quads, right? They go, look, I look at stairs and my quads get bigger. Yeah. So in that case, we're going to just knock out the quadricep-oriented volume, that's trainer terms for exercises that really hit your quads. Yep. Plain and simple. So I would just say stop working those. Why? Because training does make you bigger. Now, the other thing is, us guys, right, and other, I'm probably being too sex specific here, but it's more common for guys. We'll say, you might have certain guys that just say, I really got to work on my lateral delts. No matter what I do, these things can't come together, but I just look at a bench press and my pecs get bigger. Now, that means I don't need to do as much bench press with that person or any pec exercises, but I can take some of that work that I would have done for the pecs and fill it with extra work on the lateral delts, right? Interestingly, training is very much like eating or alcohol consumption. The more you do, the more effects you get from it, right? There is an upper limit, I'm sure, right? We call it a dose response, just like you would with a doctor. Now, that being said, if you have an area, male, female, or whatever, if you have an area that you just say, I just don't like this part of me, it already feels too bulky for me, it's my genetics or whatever, then I would absolutely say it's 100% justified to stop working that part. In fact, I know a female trainer of mine who's a super nerd, she's very well known in the field, that she said, you know what, I just stopped working my upper body because I just feel like I was just too bulky. And I go, did you just say you want to, I was joking with her, that you want to tone more? And she goes, yeah, I never believed I would say that. Yeah. So us trainers, sometimes we get too caught up in our own world, and we got to understand what our clients actually mean and not get caught up. Well, there's no such thing in toning. There's only hypertrophy and atrophy. Clients don't care about that crap. Yeah. You know, listen to what they're actually saying. What they're actually saying is, I don't like how my upper body looks, and I don't want it to get bigger.
And it's hard too, because then some males and females, they'll start to see the definition, even though they're actually smaller circumference wise, but the definition that they're mixing their message of, hey, that much definition I don't like, because it makes me, I feel like I look big, even though maybe I'm smaller in circumference.
Right. Now, the one thing that is important here is that there is no rep range for, you know, shaping, or this is some of the old, my mom was a bodybuilder in the 80s. This was common terms back in those days, you know, like shaping versus bulking. That's all complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Again, there's hypertrophy, atrophy, or stay the same.
Yeah.
Now, we may have certain genetic predispositions to respond better to certain rep ranges, but there is no way to work a muscle that will change its, you know, what this like long, lean, right, versus short and bulky. That's genetics. I'm 5'5", right? I'm a thick guy. I'm never going to be long and lean.
Yeah.
You know, I could do it. So there is no high rep, low rep. That goes against basic physiology.
That's awesome. So just to kind of round it up, I mean, obviously the strength training for fat loss is built around improving fitness. It's variety, but structured. Your ability to have some fun with the workouts and find out what they want. So I absolutely love it. And, you know, the book is just masterfully done. I can't tell you how much I love it. And the workouts are super challenging. And I've done those. So, you know, what we've talked about and what we spent a lot of time really discussing is programming and program design. And, you know, I want to spend a little time talking about your practical program design mastery class that just recently launched. And I've gone through some of it. I haven't finished the whole thing, and I love it. And especially the first, you know, 25, 30 minutes of just talking about the why. And I'd love for you to just kind of explain, you know, why was the concept done, and who's that target audience that this is best for?
Well, you asked the key question. The books are consumer driven. Practical program design mastery is towards trainers. Mm-hmm. So it's simple enough that it could be a paint by numbers for the day one trainer. If you're a facility owner and you just say, hey, look, I don't have, you know, we don't have time to train you up at everything right now, but if you watch this, you would be much further along than many people. But also, as you say, as a seasoned trainer like yourself, you get a fresh view of programming, and you get some new ideas. So, well, we have 9 modules. It's all practically driven. And the whole idea was, number one, there wasn't any real resources out there for trainers dealing with the everyday Joe and Jane client. The people like we've just talked about that come into the gym 1 or 2 times a week. They're not there to be gym rats. They're often the people that say, how do we do this exercise again? And those trainers are like, man, I've showed you this 150 times. But they're not there to be master deadlifters or anything like that, right? So again, they want those 4 things that start with F: fitness, function, fat loss, fun. How do you do that in a structured way that gives people what they want, the fun part, and blends those other 3 F's without just falling into randomness and craziness, and then just, you know, being the, what did I see on Instagram this week? That's in my head. That's what I'm going to do type thing. So that's what it's about. And we just take programs. We have systems for beginners, systems for intermediate, and systems for advanced clients, which I would call ongoing program. That's the other thing. Most of us trainers, again, I'm speaking to trainers now. Yep. we get programs and the program is 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or it has phases, right, in books, right? This is the preseason, this is the off season, or they have their peaking phases, or they have the hypertrophy phase and strength phase, right? Depending on which, linear and undulating and all these other things. None of that stuff was designed for the everyday client, right? Our everyday clients aren't peaking for anything. They don't have an in-season and an off-season. They don't even remember how to do a basic deadlift after 3 years of training. Now we want them to record an 82% of their 1RM and all this, so it was out of my realization that most of what we get our education from comes from strength coaches working with athletics and physical therapists coming from working with injured people.
Yep.
So there's some logistical issues coming down. This is by a trainer, for trainers, working in the everyday big box gym setting. We have to deal with gym logistics. We have to put trisets together, 3 exercises, to give our clients the faster pace and variety that they want. But we're dealing with 200 other members who could give a crap about us and our client, who are fighting for the same piece of equipment, right? So again, we look at, you look at personal training certification book, right, on here, and it says pair up front squat with lat pull down, because this is, I'm speaking in training terms, because this is a knee dominant movement versus a vertical pulling movement. Oh, great. Try that in a big box gym. And the lat pull down is all the way on the other side where the machines are, and the squat rack is here. So that doesn't work. As soon as you get to the squat rack, someone's taken the lat pull down machine. So there's so much of this that doesn't match what we hear talked about and what we actually what happens in the floor, on the gym floor. So what I did is I took my systems, I reverse engineer them so it's all practical. And instead of trying to take people to say, here's what we want you to do to the gym floor, I said, here's what we do on the gym floor. And we brought it to the digital classroom. So it's 100% real world. It's as real as it gets. It's like the UFC for fitness.
And you mentioned it, and I think I want to be super clear and explain a little bit more is periodization. I think is a lot of what you're talking. We've all learned this concept of periodization, and then we create a 3-month program for our client based off of this periodization, based on the times. And at the end of the day, the average person trains 1.25 times a week. They're not coming in 3, 4. And you say this in the course is we're not designing for people that are coming for, very few of our clients are coming 4 or 5 plus days a week. They're coming 2. And if that, on average, you're only probably coming 1.5. So how do we create something that is structured, that makes sense, that's going to still get results given the lack of frequency, and really they don't need to periodize the way that you had described earlier. They're not going to peak for anything. I mean, some might, but that's
yeah. It's really interesting was as soon as you bring up the word periodization, trainers constantly contradict themselves with this, right? So when you say periodization really doesn't work for general fitness, and they go, well, oh, no, it's just a plan. It's just a plan, right? And then they'll say, okay, well, most trainers don't do periodization because they don't like to get into the complexities and it's too detailed for them. So wait a minute, what is it? Is it just a plan, or is it super complex and I need to take your 2-day course for it?
Yeah.
Right. So if it's just a plan, then I don't need to take your course. Right.
Yeah.
So they contradict themselves, right? They want it, they get down in the weeds and all these phases and intensification and all these different things. But on the other hand, like, oh no, it's super basic and it's not. Okay. Now, here's what really happens. You're the trainer, you have your periodized program. And what I mean by periodized, for context here, is that it's stacking days, which means what I do on day 1 and what I do on day 2 is predicated on what I do on day 1, right? So, on day 1, I have a knee dominant movement. So day 2, I have a hip dominant movement. But that's predicated that I already filled that gap with the other day, right? And then week 2 is predicated on my sets and reps are predicated that I did both workouts in week 1 as written, and so on and so forth, right? So what you do in week 3 is predicated on 2 and week 1. Now, you have all this written out. Beautiful program. You and I would look at it and go, mwah, gorgeous, right? Client comes in and goes, can we not do any legs today? I gardened all weekend and my knees are killing me. Now, all of your trainer gurus would tell you, don't make up stuff on the fly. Have a plan for everything. Okay. Half my workout has got lower body work exercises in it. Certain warm-ups are out now. Certain exercises are out now. Certain sequences are out now. I might as well ball that up and throw it in the garbage.
Yeah.
I'm stuck with making stuff up on the fly. Right? Now, this is every day, multiple times a day for your client. Oh, okay. Let's say they didn't say that. You go on the gym floor and all the equipment you want to use is taken. Or you wanted to go in the aerobic room because you get a little privacy there and there's a class. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? This is daily for trainers, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just being lazy about programming and not wanting to have everything written. It's just understanding that you have to have a system that's like a football coach. We're going to go in with a game plan.
It's the big linoleum things that they're carrying around now with all the different options.
With game plan. But the game plan allows me to be responsive based on what's happening. What can the client do? What availability do I have with equipment? So on and so forth. Oh, your knee's hurting you today? We all had clients like that. One day their knee hurts them doing something. The next time it doesn't hurt them, right? Okay. Oh, my bad knee's flaring up again. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's daily. So it's having a system that looks at things in broader categories. Now, the whole idea of periodization, which is this progress, well, depends on the goal, really. We progress in regards to overall challenge of the workout, which is overall volume. That's what we have for beginners versus intermediate for advanced. However, when it comes to advanced, there's a little bit of that kind of set and rep progress, but here's the other thing. You can't just keep upping weights and doing more sets because now you expand the amount of time that you're training, right? And you only have a certain amount of time. So what's the best way in this context to get more out of people without changing the time? Well, you have to normally you do more reps at that point. So if we periodize, it's normally just, asking them to do, more reps. So again, I can't give a whole 9 module. I don't know how many hours we have there, and we have tons of done for you workouts in that as well. But we have systems that are repeatable. So that way, if you refer somebody to me, this is what's most important. If you don't have a system, you don't have anything. Yep. When you go to Starbucks because when you order a vanilla chai latte, I've just made that up, but that could be a drink. It's going to taste the same whether you're in Boston or Beijing because they have a system. Now, they have individuality with that. Do you want it with an extra shot? Do you want it with some extra water in there? Do you want it with a little splash of this, a little less of that? You understand what I'm going at. So that's what we talk about. We have a structured system that'll work no matter what, that we stick with, that is consistent. However, it's not systemized, which means it's not robotic, which means there is individualization. And that's where trainers tend to go wrong. When things don't fit exactly what they wrote, which they never will fit, then it just becomes the Wild West.
Yep.
Right? What we're saying is don't go Wild West. Here's what our options will be, which is the kind of if this, then that sort of situation. So we still have structure, but it's flexible.
And that's everything that's taught in this particular course.
Correct. Versus most periodization is just A, B, C, D, E, and no room for change and no room for deviation. And it's just not realistic for what trainers see.
Yeah. And that's why obviously it's called practical program design. And that analogy is fantastic because I think so many trainers, hey, here's some amazing templates. You got Charles Polquin that put together an amazing program for strength training, and then you're using that and they feel, oh, well, it's not personalized. No. This is the structure, how you tweak it to what's in front of you and what you're seeing in front of you, that becomes the individualization. And that's kind of what you're saying this helps them do.
Correct. And also keep in mind, this is a client-centered approach versus a trainer-centered approach. Trainer-centered is I'm going to do something to you. Client-centered is I'm going to do something for you based on what's important to you. And a lot of trainers think that clients don't care or don't get it or don't do what they're saying. It's because us trainers don't get it. Is we're looking at it from, oh, I took this program from coach so-and-so and coach so-and-so's trained world-class, this, that, and the other. It's like, yeah, but this person who you've been training for 2 years doesn't even remember how to do a deadlift. Yep. You're comparing them to what NFL players do. Yeah. And then disappointed when they don't do it. It's like, I would say it's a lack of perspective and understanding that you're not, again, it's not understanding the neck up. So this is designed to say, understand why your client is coming to you. This is not compromising your values,
Yeah.
right? But it is saying is, why is the client coming to you? What are they interested in? And they're getting you as a facilitator, not as a dictator.
Yeah.
And what are you going to facilitate for them? And it's those 4 F's. So the program is designed around what's important to your clients. And lo and behold, they'll stay around and they will sing your praises and they will refer everybody and their dog to you.
Yep.
With that. And they'll be excited to come in.
And that's how you make your career out of this thing, you know?
Correct.
That's awesome. Well, my last question for you is, you know, obviously you've got a wealth of knowledge. You've learned from tons and tons of people, you know, being able to write for T Nation. I'm sure you have connections in throughout there, but, you know, throughout your career, I think a lot of people are missing the mentors or the people that have influenced them to truly make this a career that I always say you can retire from, because back in the day you couldn't do that. But, you know, your success, and a lot of people are very, very successful and they are able to do that. So, you know, who are the people, some of the people that had the biggest influence on you as a trainer?
Well, bar none, it was Coach Juan Carlos Santana. His work I resonated with the most. Mm-hmm. And lately we've been doing a lot of Instagram live chats with, you know, JC and I.
Yeah.
But I would also say Paul Chek was a big influence on me early on.
Yeah.
Now I'm certainly not saying I agree. Like you kind of said this, you know, I agree with a lot of things or everything these guys say. Heck, I don't even agree with some of the things that I said 5 years ago.
Exactly.
But in regards to, I first saw Paul Chek and I realized, man, there's a lot more to training than just machines and dumbbells and bodybuilding exercises. That was the first time I was just wowed by someone's knowledge, and I was like 17 years old at the time. So I learned a lot from him, but it was JC Santana, when I started getting more into it, his style, his approach resonated with me a little bit more. It was a little bit more background in combat sports, which I was into. He had a little bit more of a kind of a looser, you know, everyday man kind of, you know, approach. Chek's approach was a little more militaristic. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I didn't really resonate as much with. So that was a little bit of that personality type.
Yeah. I always say the more you know, the more you realize you don't know too. So as we're learning, and what's right today is wrong tomorrow, what's wrong tomorrow is right today. So as you were saying, there's so much out there.
Right. Yeah. And the 2 other names I want to throw out there are Gary Gray and Vern Gambetta were also influential.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. And you were fortunate enough to live, I believe, fairly close to where JC, this facility was.
At one point, yeah. But I also can't neglect that. Probably my biggest influence, was my mom. And I know that might sound kind of cliche, you know what I mean? But my mom was a bodybuilder in the 80s. I literally grew up going to gyms with my mom while she was training for bodybuilding shows. That's and she was also an aerobics instructor. She was like one of the original Jim Miller Reebok instructors. So, I mean, when I say I literally grew up, I'm talking about like 5 years old watching my mom teach classes, you know, so it's pretty hard to not be influenced by that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. I think there was just an amazing amount of knowledge and an amazing amount of information. And, you know, we'll supply the links to your books and to the course as we, you know, get this out to the public. So I really appreciate it. Your time, we went a little bit over. So anything else that you wanted to add or anything you wanted to say?
No, I got nothing to add. I just appreciate everybody. If they've hung in with us this long, it means you truly care, and hope we made it worth your while.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks.
Thanks.